Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Tuesday, December 14th. Time for another show. It is a show with Joan McCarter on vacation today. I don't know, vacation. Staycation, maybe, but off nonetheless, so we'll miss her greatly because there's treason afoot. And not that I think she's a particularly adept trader or anything like that. I'm just saying she'd like to talk about other people's treason. Don't get the wrong idea. There will be plenty to talk about that today. Of course, I think biggest story this morning has got to be the same as the biggest story from last night, which is that, I guess the big news clip that went with it is the video of Congresswoman Cheney, still a congresswoman, they couldn't kick her out of that position, reading off the texts, I guess, that were recovered from or turned over from Mark Meadows' phone. I don't know whether it was his private phone or his government phone, because he was using both to do emailing and texting and other business at the White House, which is, of course, a problem all by itself and would land any ordinary administration in trouble anyway. And the texts, of course, were from, among others, members of Congress and the big-name celebrity, I don't know what they call them anymore, show hosts, commentators, whatever, on the Fox News channel, Laura Ingraham, Sean Hannity, several others. I don't remember. Brian Kilmeade, is he one of them? Is that the name? And, by the way, Donald Trump Jr. as well, plus, one from an still unnamed, I guess, member of Congress, but all insisting that something had gone terribly awry at the Capitol and that Trump had to do something to call the people off. They were, it had gotten out of hand. And lots of dramatic video of her reading all of these texts. You've likely seen it by now, and of course you've also likely seen people speculating on, well, why is it that Donald Trump Jr. has to tweet or text? I don't know, maybe he did tweet. They used Parler blurbs or whatever the hell they call the things on Parler. But he had to go through Mark Meadows in order to get to his dad and say, you got to stop this stuff. It was fascinating to see for a number of reasons, not the least of which, of course, was that during the day, all of these commentators were saying this is an outrage. This will destroy your legacy. This, they recognized it for what it was and the danger that it actually posed, not only to physically to the Capitol and to the members of Congress there, but also to, as they, only they would care about, Donald Trump's legacy as president. And then by the evening, they were back on the air saying, well, it was all Antifa anyway, and maybe they were even tourists, and it was an okay thing, and actually you need to do this every once in a while. And Donald Trump is a huge hero for doing so. So, that was an interesting turn of events. And let's see, what other fun things were there that, there's the other issues that it raises, of course, is that these are the texts that he was willing to turn over, and I guess that there might still be some that they believe, that they're still claiming privilege for. I've seen a couple of people pointing out, if these are the non-privileged texts, what's in the other ones? And that's the big question. Right? Also weird that Donald Trump Jr. didn't have a direct line. Maybe he did, but he just thought maybe his chief of staff would come off as more authoritative in telling him that than his son would, and that might actually be true. And, I guess maybe in a normal family that should be true, even though I think probably Ivanka having said something probably would have moved him even more, but I don't know. No texts from Ivanka saying anything about that. I guess their friends are appalled, Jared and Ivanka's friends. Man, so there's a lot to unpack from all of it, but here we are. The Kagro and the show is live now. Thank you for listening in Sweden. The Kagro in the Morning radio show is live now. You can tell by the fact that I can't say the name properly and I didn't just stop the tape and do it over again. It's such a boring time of the year, news-wise, that Bill says Kagro X, me, will probably just spend 2 hours telling us how to knit oven mitts using the world-famous triple stitch over the pinky method. I didn't even know that was a method. All right, excellent. Definitely good news to catch up on that. I think we should probably focus on the fun things in life rather than the treason. Couldn't we just do that? Well, let's see. Twitter is also abuzz this morning. I don't know. I might as well just open the Twitter feed and discuss what's going on there more than anything else. Oh, Lordy. Some photos coming across that are just, well, too disturbing. Of, awkward Christmas card photos. Not the gun ones either. Anyway, I thought of some interest to you might also be everyone circulating the new Atlantic piece. The Atlantic, I think, is contractually obligated, you may know, to every once in a while publish something totally insane that undoes all of their lucid work on other subjects. We just read the Barton Gellman piece last Friday that was so important, and so many things get published there that are so insightful. And this, too, was insightful. It was just, insightful in a bad way. I'm talking, of course, about the piece titled, Where I Live, No One Cares About COVID. And I guess it was supposed to be a provocative piece. I did see somebody circulating it this morning with, the warning, like, this will make a lot of people angry, but, a lot of people really feel this way, and it's important for you to know about it, which I don't know whether that was somebody saying, like, I'm simply thinking you should observe this intellectually speaking, so that you know where people are, although we know where they are. I mean, Herman Cain thought the pandemic was over, too, and behaved like it was over, and he's dead, and that's what he has to show for it, and that was a long time ago. And my newspapers are filled with, or not mine necessarily, but the newspapers, thanks to, social media, we all share the same local newspapers. They're full of obituaries of people who behaved exactly this way. And, it's just, who knows what it is. This person, I gather, may actually be vaccinated, although apparently they haven't gotten a booster. Although, some people around here also haven't gotten boosters. And what are you going to do about that? But, I actually believe in the boosters and would like to get one and plan to get one. So that sets me apart. We could actually wade through that piece, I think. I might have stuck it in Pocket. Maybe not. But I did open it earlier on my phone, and the Atlantic is pretty sure that it's my last article for the month, which was a terrible waste, of course. And it always disturbs me to no end especially when I do it by accident, just click on something and say, oh, yeah, I should have been more conscious about how many articles I have. Because I don't really want to read this one. I just want to see, is it real more than anything else. I don't know the author. You don't know the author. That's just the basics of it. It's Matthew Walther. And the basic gist of it is, I live in real America. And outside, as it says here in the subheader, outside the world inhabited by the professional classes in a handful of major metropolitan areas, many Americans are leading their lives as if COVID is over. That is true. There are some 820,000 people who, their last memory of it is that they were living their life anyway. Although I assume that several 100,000 of them thought that COVID wasn't over, at least at the last moment. But anyway, and there's another 150,000 now having the same issue. And we have to wait and see what their outcomes are going to be. And who knows how many hundreds of thousands living as though they had beaten the whole system here. When, again, I remind you, 80% plus of the country just simply hasn't had it yet. And they're mistaking the fact that the virus is taking its time, working its way through the population that's still unvaccinated for success at having evaded it. And that's not the same thing. Anyway, it's very, maybe it's not even all that self-righteous a piece or anything. It's just, although, he's clearly sort of a self-righteous person. There's a lot of mention of how much time they spent praying the rosary during lockdowns and how their kids go. This was an interesting one, I thought, for somebody who was so down on, major metropolitan areas and professional classes, that their kids were schooling at they're not in school, they're not at home school, they're at a homeschool co-op, which is a school, by the way. It's called a private school, and it's just hastily put together and sloppily done with no professional teachers. School. A charter school, in other words. So, I don't know. It was interesting that he had to invent another category for himself. Our kids are going to school over at the neighbor's house. Used to be a teacher, and I, pay her in home-baked huckleberry pies, for all I know. What the F do I know about how they pay this person? Anyway, it's out there. People are reading it, and look, I mean, I don't really, the idea that people would be terribly mad about it seems a little silly. I mean, there are some people who are mad about it, and they say, well, you are perpetuating the pandemic for the rest of us. But what's really happening here is that, I guess they're saying that the people who are getting the booster shots and maybe even a fourth shot, they're sort of outraged at the notion that there would even be a fourth shot. All they're doing is, the fourth shots aren't necessarily about belonging to some weird political tribe. I mean, I view it this way. You want to put it as raw as we can. I mean, I guess if all the cards are on the table, you put your thing down there. Oh, I don't care about COVID, or at least the people around me don't care about COVID, and I approve of the way they live their lives. What's to me is interesting is I think a lot of people are getting the vaccine and getting the boosters and would sign up for a fourth booster so that they can survive to laugh at your obituary. Does that disturb you? I mean, that's going to get a lot of people angry, but people are hanging on to read about you and the Herman Cain Awards. That's basically what life is about at this point. And it's an empty life. But what can you do? That's what people are doing. I just find it bizarre. You don't have to brag on this. This doesn't really help anybody. And I don't think anybody needs to know about it necessarily. We know that you're living the life of an idiot and that eventually you'll get sick and die, or whatever, or have a conversion as Regeneron saves your life. Whatever. I don't know. Maybe you won't. Maybe you'll remain convinced that it was just the flu, et cetera, et cetera. But, a million people are going to be dead, and it doesn't look that great. And I don't know how many rosaries you have to say to get away with dismissing the death of 1,000 people. But on the other hand, I don't have to say rosaries, so I hope I get away with it, and I hope you don't. There you go. I'm a hypocrite, and I love it. All I'm saying is, don't write anything that's going to end up as the first half of a how it started, how's it going tweet. You don't have to dare COVID to kill you. You don't have to tempt fate. I don't think that's extraordinary. I don't think that's a wise thing to do. But, if you're a writer, I guess that's how you get paid. And so, whatever. Okay, so, who was it that was tweeting? I did see some good responses to this. Oh, yeah, here we go. Professor Emily Oster, who I don't know. I don't think I know. Economics professor at Brown University. So, she probably should have done a regression on this thing to see whether it was going to help her out. My son can now help her with the econometrics of it. That's good news. She says, this will make a lot of people very angry, but I think it's important to realize this perspective is very much one that many people have. Okay, but I knew that, so cool. I did see a nice response from, Jacob Bacharach, who actually uses the address of Jake Backpack out there. And he writes the same thing. This will make a lot of people very angry, but I think it's important to realize this is a perspective that is very much one that many people have, and it is a person in a person in like some sort of weird looking maybe chicken outfit, chicken suit or something, holding a 9/11 was an inside job sign. So why not? I had to throw in my picture of the former, what was it? which county was it? Tarrant County, Texas Republican chair, who wearing his jester cap, holding the sign that says Trump is a child rapist, and say the same thing. But I don't know. The chicken suit thing was funnier. Are you interested in this article? Maybe I'll open it up again because it's already open on my phone. And I'll give you a taste of what the guy is going on about. Again, it's Matthew Walther, Walther. There's a note up here that says he's the editor of The Lamp, a Catholic literary journal, and a contributing editor at the American Conservative. So I guess that means he lives somewhere real where people are enjoying, trying to decide which wire to cut on the neutron bomb, the undetonated neutron bomb that has landed in their community, just for fun. So the kind of people we're talking about. In November, my wife asked me whether I had seen an article with the remarkable headline, "Is it safe to go to Thanksgiving dinner?" "Is that from last year?" I asked. "No, it's a few days old," she said, her voice sinking to a growling murmur. Who's getting mad here? "These people," it says. "I am old enough to remember the good old days when holiday advice pieces were all variations on how to talk to your Tea Party uncle about Obamacare," which was also a tragedy, by the way. "As Christmas approaches, we can look forward to more of this sort of thing, with the meta-ethical speculation advanced to an impossibly Baroque stage of development." And italicized here, "Is it okay for our 2-year-old son to hug grandma at a Christmas party if she received her booster only a few days ago? Should the toddler wear a mask except when he is slopping mashed potatoes all over his booster seat? Our oldest finally attended her first masked sleepover with other fully vaccinated 10-year-olds, but one of them had a sibling test positive at daycare. Should she stay home or wear a face shield? And what about Omicron?" Ooh, wow, what a scary, crazy question. What about Omicron? I don't know how to put this in a way that will not make me sound flippant. There ain't no way to do it. Just say it. "No one cares. Literally speaking, I know this isn't true because if it were, the articles wouldn't be commissioned. But outside the world inhabited by the professionals and managerial classes, unlike me, the editor of The Lamp, and a contributor to the American Conservative, who's not at all professional or managerial class. Anyway, those people in a handful of major metropolitan areas, many, if not most, Americans are leading their lives as if COVID is over, and they have been for a long while. I know. And a lot of you are dead. In my part of rural southwest Michigan, and in similar communities throughout the country, this is not true this is true, not despite, but without any noticeable regard for cases. Hospitalization statistics, which are always high this time of year, so who cares? Without attracting much notice, or death reports. Hospitalization is probably high this time of year, and fewer of them die. And you can still get a bed if you break your leg. Anyway, I don't mean to deny COVID's continuing presence. For the purposes of this piece, I looked up the COVID data for my county and found that the 7-day average for positive tests is as high as it's ever been, and that 136 deaths have been attributed to the virus since June of 2020. That's all the people you have in that county, possibly. What I wish to convey is that the virus simply does not factor into my calculations or those of my neighbors who have been forgoing masks, tests, unless work imposes them, in which case they're shrugged off as the usual BS from human resources, and other tangible markers of COVID-19's existence for months, perhaps even longer. Indeed, in my case, when I say for a long while, I mean nearly 2 years, from almost the very beginning. In 2020, I took part in 2 weddings, traveled extensively, took family vacations with my children, spent hundreds of hours in bars and restaurants, all without wearing a mask. This year, my wife and I welcomed our 4th child. Over the course of her pregnancy, from the first phone call to the midwife, a few months after getting a positive pregnancy test until after delivery, the subject of the virus was never raised by any healthcare professional, including her doula, a dear friend from New York. Uh-oh, a doula. He must be some professional class type person. Anyway, I mean, if he's the editor of The Lamp, I don't know where The Lamp is published, and a contributor to the American Conservative from his corner of rural, supposedly, southwest Michigan, my guess is he's been working from home this whole time. So, yeah, he probably didn't have the virus and probably doesn't spend a lot of time with a mask on. Sure, of course. Anyway, further on down in here. Oh, yeah, it's actually in the next paragraph. Meanwhile, our children who have continued to attend their weekly homeschooling co-op since April 2020 have never donned masks. And they are distinctly uncomfortable on the rare occasions when they see them, for reasons that until recently child psychologists and other medical experts would have freely acknowledged. Except that they'll freely acknowledge it now. It's just that they also say, oh, also there are millions of normal people who have gotten used to this stuff. Anyway, I'm not going to read the rest of it. It's a stupid thing. And, I guess it's meant to be infuriating, but it's really not. It's just sort of, okay. And now you have an eye out for Matthew, what's his name? Walther's obituary, I guess. And if it happens and you go, ha, what a dummy. And if it doesn't, great, more power to you, I guess. But in the meantime, I thought this was an interesting reaction to it from Twitter personality Schooly, who points out, this is an interesting observation. What's fascinating, he says, about the latest dispatch from the real America is these are always the same people that tell us they live in a place where people take care of each other. Neighbors look out for each other. It's a small town. We all know one another. We all know who died from COVID, who didn't. But he doesn't because he works at home and his kids don't go to an actual school. And who knows what his wife does, if anything. They stay home and pray the rosary. And he works from home, and he thinks he's got his finger on the pulse of real America. So, whatever. So, I don't know. Be on the lookout, I guess. And if you ever see him show up in the Herman Cain Awards, we'll point and laugh and say, thank God the booster vaccine allowed me to live to see this day. So, all right, let's see. What's in southwestern Michigan, by the way? I'm just sort of taking a look. I mean, is it rural? I don't know. I guess he's south of, I don't know. I mean, how far down in the corner do you think he is? In southwestern Michigan, Grand Rapids isn't exactly southwestern. I mean, it's in the grand scheme of Michigan, I guess. But I mean, I assume he's further south than that, and it looks like it might be a little more sparsely populated than that. But I guess Kalamazoo is the big city. Yeah, Battle Creek is there. I mean, it's populated. I'm not saying that it isn't, but I guess there's some places where it's less paved over down here in the corner. I guess I can see that. So, all right, interesting. That would put him, I guess, in the neighborhood of, I don't know, maybe South Bend over the border. So, it's not like he's unable to get news, but he just doesn't care about it. So, big whoop, I guess we would say to that. What else? Let's see. Bill was tweeting about about all the treason that went on yesterday, or the treason that we read about yesterday. That is the part about all the texts from Meadows' phone asking, have we considered that all of those hair on fire texts were just sarcasm? The big guy loves him some sarcasm. That must have really been something, by the way, to have been around watching these messages come in on your phone. If he was, maybe he stopped reading them, and then just watching Trump, like sitting there like a lump, watching the whole thing on TV and smiling and clapping and laughing. It just seems like it must have been somewhat disturbing, but maybe not. Maybe he's just a psychopath. Meadows as well. You never know. All right. Let's see. Other things I have put away for you here, though I really should just spend some time scrolling through Twitter. And there were lots of things that I know that I saw yesterday that were kind of interesting that I didn't bother parking in Pocket. But along with those things, let's see. Here's another Herman Cain type award. I just thought I would mention it because it made the Times. What Times? I don't know. This is not the New York Times. Where is this? The only way sometimes you can tell where these guys are from is to look at their weather page and hope that they'll give you a map. Is it Pennsylvania? I think I just saw as I clicked by that I had seen. Yeah, there we are. So the weather that it brings up is for Aliquippa, Aliquippa. I think in the neighborhood of York, Pennsylvania. I thought I saw something on the front page there. So if you're from the area and you know how to pronounce it, let me know. Anyway, a balmy 32 degrees, by the way. So good luck to you on that. The news article here is man whose wife won a court battle, congratulations, to treat his COVID-19 with ivermectin, has died. Oh, yeah. Well, Mike Argento has the news from the York Daily Record. That's how I figured it out. Okay. This is just picked up by The Times from Aliquippa. What do you say? All right. Let's see. Keith Smith. Not Kevin Smith, but Keith. That would have been something. But Keith Smith, whose wife had gone to court to have his COVID-19 infection treated with ivermectin, died Sunday evening, a week after he received his first dose of the controversial drug. He was 52, so, it was his time. Smith had been in the UMPC Memorial Medical Center, that's the MC, I guess, in medical center, I added that for unknown reasons, for nearly 3 weeks, and had been in the hospital's intensive care unit in a medically induced coma on a ventilator since November 21st, which is amazing because they knew about ivermectin before then. Why didn't they buy horse paste and eat it at home in order to prevent this whole thing from happening? Anyway, he had been diagnosed with the virus on November 10th. His wife of 24 years, Darla, had gone to court to compel UPMC to treat her husband with ivermectin, an antiparasitic drug that has not been approved for the treatment of COVID-19. And she won, and a week later, he ate it and died. And that's the story.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Coast, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. So, yeah, that's the upshot of that story. I know I cut off right in the middle of it. I didn't realize how much time we had wasted on the other dude who believes COVID is over. This guy's COVID is over here, Keith Smith. Well done there, Darla. Spent the last moments you had to spend with your husband in court instead to give him ivermectin. I guess it wasn't the horse paste you were giving him. You were probably giving him the human medical grade stuff. And I suppose you'll probably leave thinking, well, the problem was that we were delayed by the courts and all the stupid people. If we had gotten the drug earlier, it would have saved his life, even though he was in a medically induced coma or whatever. He wasn't coming back, and ivermectin wasn't going to do anything. But at least you spent your last couple days you had with him filing motions. So you'll always have that. Let's see. By way of other information from this piece, there is a little bit more here. York County Court Judge Clyde Vedder's December 3rd decision did not compel the hospital to treat Keith with the drug, in case you were wondering, but it did allow Darla to have an independent physician administer it. He received 2 doses before Keith's condition grew worse, and the doctor halted the treatment. By the way, so I'm glad I read on this, because I figured that ivermectin fans would walk away from this by saying, well, right, all the red tape and wrangling in court with people who don't understand the realities about ivermectin and how effective it can really be made it too late. So they set him up for failure by making him wait. But as it turns out, this is interesting and additional information. He got 2 doses and it made his condition worse. He was already in a medically induced coma and had been since, December 21st, and was on a ventilator. They gave him exactly what Darla sued to be able to give him in exactly the way that the doctor who gave it to him wanted to give it to him. And it actually made, how do you make somebody's condition worse when they are in a medically induced coma and on a ventilator? Like, that's poison, guys. That's why we don't give it to people. So there you go. He received 2 doses. His condition grew worse, and even the doctor who was willing to stand in and administer ivermectin once Darla got the courts to intervene said, "Oh, this stuff just isn't working. In fact, it's making it worse. We just got to stop." But Darla was sure she was right. So that's kind of weird that it worked that way. Anyway, tonight, it says in the story, around 7:45 p.m., my precious husband breathed his last breath. I would check on the insurance situation about between them at this point. I mean, it might not be her fault that he got COVID. That might be his own doing. But it sounds like she killed him. But she totally didn't mean it. Well, anyway, that's what Darla wrote on the website, caringbridge.org, whatever that might be. He died with Darla and their 2 sons, Carter and Zach, at his bedside. Sorry about that. Darla wrote, they had time to speak to Keith separately and as a group before he passed away. My boys are so strong, she wrote. They are my rock of solace. And I guess you have to cling to that. I wonder what they said to him. We're giving you some poison, Dad. I hope it helps. I read on the internet that this would cure you, but it actually killed you, and I'm sorry about that. Oh, well. She described his last moments. Should we even look into this? Is this just too much? I think it is. I think it's a little bit gross. Anyway, the upshot of it is ivermectin. It don't work. Stop suing to try to get it. So, let's see. I'm curious if there's any discussion about who is this doctor and where does he come from, and I think there is. Darla had sued UPMC to treat her husband with ivermectin after reading about similar cases throughout the country, all filed by an attorney in Buffalo, New York. I don't think I understand what that means. Sued to treat her husband after reading about similar cases throughout the country. Is the lawsuit filed by an attorney from Buffalo, New York, or did an attorney from Buffalo, New York compile all the articles she read? I can't tell. She was assisted by a group called, Greg knows who it is, Frontline COVID-19 Critical Care Alliance. We've heard of those guys before. They were the ones. Did Darla read that they just had a big conference in Florida and they all got COVID? I guess not. Anyway, or maybe she was already suing by that point, so she might have had no idea at the time, and she didn't want to change course by the time she figured it out. Anyway, whether the drug is effective in treating COVID-19 is unproven, and studies cited by its proponents have been dismissed as being biased and including incomplete or non-existent data. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration has not approved the use of the drug to treat COVID-19. And the National Institutes of Health does not recommend its use. It is not included in UPMC's COVID-19 treatment protocols, probably as a result of all the aforementioned facts, which, by the way, are facts, YouTube. So don't panic. I totally believe that. Let's see. So he received his first dose, which he shouldn't have done because COVID-19 is not effectively treated by ivermectin, right? Got his first dose on December 5th, 2 days after Vetter's decision in the court case, which I'm sure, I don't know, I'd like to read the decision. I'm curious whether the judge was sympathetic or whether he was like, all right, I mean, he's on a ventilator in a medically induced coma. Eventually you're going to have to make a decision about whether you turn the machine off. If you want to turn the machine off and give him horse paste, I guess go for it. I don't know. Well, anyway, after Keith received the second dose, the doctor overseeing the drug's administration, a physician not affiliated with UPMC, ended the treatment as Keith's condition deteriorated, like it destroyed his intestines, I guess. Darla had written that she was unsure whether ivermectin could help her husband, but it was worth a try. The use of the drug was described as a Hail Mary, intended as a last-ditch effort to save Keith's life. She would not say whether her husband had been vaccinated. That would be the first ditch, but that's a no. If you won't say, it's a no. She was angry with UPMC for refusing to administer the treatment, forcing her to sue, and for delaying the treatment, pardon me, for 2 days as the hospital grappled with the meaning of the court order, while Darla arranged to have an independent nurse administer the drug. Oh, wow. Interesting. Did she get a doctor in the end or a nurse? Citing privacy laws, UPMC had previously declined to disclose details of the case or Keith's treatment. Blah, blah, blah. Let's see. Oh, she had kind words for the nurses at UPMC, just hates the doctors. Writing, I still love you, she wrote, you cared for Keith over 21 days. You dosed him with the medicines his doctor prescribed. You cleaned him and groomed him, moved him, propped him up, dealt with every mess, blah, blah, blah. Okay, she appreciates him. That's nice. That's all I'll say about UPMC at this time, she wrote. You're incredibly lucky to have the nurses you do. Jackwads. Treat them better. This is a written piece. Jackwads. All right. Treat them better. How about you treat them better by getting vaccinated so they don't have to wipe the butts of idiots who are dying and have poisoned themselves with something that just eroded their intestines. So no wonder they're having to have to wipe their butts the whole time. I'm sure the nurses really enjoyed, putting your husband on a ventilator, watching you sue to give him horse medicine. That was really respectful of you. I'm sure they were like, this is fantastic. I love having my work undone. Although they may, at this stage of the game, they might be like, you know what? This guy's a goner. We need the bed. Give him the ivermectin fast. And then we'll be able to treat somebody who wants, actual medicine in this bed. Anyway, want to know more? Keith Smith was a structural engineer, not an idiot, I guess, a vice president of a firm headquartered in Lancaster. He was a graduate of Penn State and an avid fan of the Nittany Lions football team. He didn't manage to see the end of the season, but whatever. He was active, his wife said, and enjoyed woodworking and skiing and horse stuff. And he was a devout Christian, so that's good. His wife told a story about a trip to Baltimore. You know what? Never mind. I don't know. You want to hear something redeeming about the guy? I guess. Sure. I shouldn't cut off now. It doesn't tell us anything, but whatever. The family had passed. I don't even know if this is true. I guess I should say that. But she decided to tell this story to the newspapers. But she also decided to put out a public statement that ended with jackwads. So here's your devout Christian, jackwads. Allegedly, this jackwad told a story about a trip to Baltimore where the family passed a jackwad homeless man on the sidewalk. And as Darla and his sons walked ahead, Keith, momentarily, I guess, overcome by not being a jackwad, stopped to speak to him. That's terrific. And after hearing the story, gave the man some money. Darla chastised him for it because she's a jackwad, saying the man was just going to spend the money on drugs. But Keith told her, he said he wanted something to eat. And Keith wanted to help him. A demonstration of his faith, which it is. Good. Fantastic. And, maybe you'll meet God now and tell him about how your wife killed you. If heaven is indeed real, just as God should be real, I'm not certain how this is supposed to be read, but he chose not to reveal himself, and I will never, ever in a million years understand why, then I know that Keith is at peace, Darla wrote. So I guess she wasn't as devout, let's say, as her husband was. Her husband's death has shaken Darla's faith. Now, I can totally understand that, but I don't know if she had a whole lot to begin with. I don't know. And God remains to be seen, she wrote. At the moment, we are not on speaking terms, and we may never be again. He's a jackwad, apparently. I don't know. We are where we are. Okay, so it's quite the philosophy. She had been looking for signs. Earlier Sunday, she wrote she was vacuuming when she saw a pack of 8 deer in the yard of her family's home in the outdoor country club area of Manchester Township. It was weird, she wrote, a sight she had never seen before in her suburban neighborhood. Deer. All right, is it 8 deer? So there's your sign. Later, she spoke to Keith's parents who live in South Carolina, and his mother told her that a gaggle of wild turkeys had appeared in their yard earlier in the week. Keith's mother also told her that a rose bloomed right outside a window, despite the temperatures dropping into the 20s at night. No one could explain why a massive rose would pop up like that and stubbornly stay in place and live, she wrote. We thought it was a sign. I thought a lot of things were signs. So I tried horse medicine, and it didn't work, and that was the end of it. I am dismissing the rest of this article as nonsense. I mean, if you're into the sentimentalism of it, I guess you could read about it, but now it just feels like we're prying into the lives of a couple of idiots that, effed up everything and killed the dad, who once gave money to a homeless man. So, I don't know. My sensitivity meter is off. I can't judge things like that this morning. I guess I might also add, all this time I've delayed saying it, but today is December 14th, which of course makes it, what are we on here, 2021? So the 9th anniversary of the Sandy Hook shooting, those kids who were 6 years old and who should now be 15 and 16 years old, perhaps, and juniors in high school, sophomores in high school, but who are instead dead. And golly gee, we just haven't done a great deal about the assault weapons since then. And how many school shootings have we had since then? And we seem to have one every other week. All right. You can tell I'm out of compassion between school shootings and insurrection and COVID idiots. I'm low on compassion, so I just move away from the story. But I do want to note the fact that it actually, the anniversary falls on this day, and you should take note of it and give yourself a moment to remember. Shifting gears again, back to the Capitol insurrection news. I thought this was an interesting bit. I did not know this. Jake Sherman is out and tweeting. That's not the news. That's usually what's happening from Punchbowl, Anyway, he says in his tweet from earlier this morning, last night, as we all know, the January 6th committee released texts that Meadows got on January 6th. I knew I had communicated with a ton of White House officials that day as I sat in the Capitol. This thread stuck out to me. That's because they were my texts to Meadows. And they are screenshotted from one of the written reports, news reports about yesterday's hearing and reading these things out loud. One text Mr. Meadows received said, quote, "We are under siege up here at the Capitol." Another, quote, "They have breached the Capitol." In a third, "Mark, protesters are literally storming the Capitol, breaking windows on doors, rushing in. Is Trump going to say something?" A fourth, "There's an armed standoff at the House chamber door." And another, from someone inside the Capitol, "We are all helpless." This is the way I think Mary, you think of the other one, her sister, right? But Liz Cheney was reading these things, and I guess this is the report of her reading it. And then Jake goes on to say, here they are from my phone. So a screenshot of them actually on his phone. Then all of those, I guess, were from him, although Cheney made it sound like maybe they came from different people. They didn't. Anyway, he says, "I'm sure it will come out that this was me. Seems impossible that it will stay a secret. So out of transparency, here it is. I got no response for what it's worth." And that's the end of the conversation. So there they are. Let's see. There's also "Do something for us. We are under siege in the Capitol. There's an armed standoff at the House chamber door. We are all helpless." And no response. And that's because, I don't know, for all the time that they spent carrying water for the administration, not in the same way as Fox, admittedly, but, for all the normalizing that they did for the president, in the end, he was overjoyed to have them trapped and possibly facing death, and so had no response for them. And, I don't know whether they learned any lesson from that at all. Just thought I would, put that out there. Okay, let's see. Other things that we have stored away for you in Pocket. That'll change the subject from some of these other bits. Let's see. some highly recommended pieces from the Times about America's anti-democratic movement. Dave Leonhardt writing on this, and he's always good at these things. Let's read a little bit and maybe see how far it gets us towards our next break. This is from yesterday's New York Times. Will come as no surprise to you, but sometimes these people put things pointedly and help us refocus our energies. American politics these days can often seem fairly normal, thanks to Punchbowl and others. President Biden has had both big accomplishments and big setbacks in his first year, as is typical. In Congress, members are haggling over bills and passing some of them. At the Supreme Court, justices are hearing cases. Daily media coverage tends to reflect this apparent sense of political normalcy. As I always say, there's still 31 flavors of everything available for you. The shelves are still stocked, even though Republicans prefer to circulate pictures of empty shelves and say that's the reality. Even though they also say that they've been living their life normally with no regard for COVID, and I assume that also means I have also noticed no shortages of anything on the shelves. But whatever. But American politics today is not really normal. It may instead be in the midst of a radical shift away from the democratic rules and traditions that have guided the country for a very long time. An anti-democratic movement, inspired by Donald Trump, but much larger than him, and he's large, I've added that part. Okay, you caught me. Is making significant progress, as my colleague Charles Homans has reported, referring here to an earlier New York Times piece about, well, you know what, about, I think, the erosion of trust in elections, and especially, I think, also what Leonhardt here is going to get at is the replacement of local officials, competent local elections officials, with partisan people who are being elected on the promise of overturning elections that don't go for Republicans. Anyway, in the states that decide modern presidential elections, this movement has already changed some laws and ousted election officials with the aim of overturning future results. It has justified the changes with blatantly false statements claiming that Biden did not really win the 2020 election. The movement has encountered surprisingly little opposition. Most leading Republican politicians have either looked the other way or supported the anti-democratic movement. In the House, Republicans ousted Liz Cheney from a leadership position because she called out Trump's lies. The pushback within the Republican Party has been so weak that about 60% of Republican adults now tell pollsters that they believe the 2020 election was stolen, a view that's simply wrong. Most Democratic officials, for their part, have been focused on issues other than election security, like COVID-19, that one I can't blame them for, and the economy. Hard to blame them on that even. It's true that congressional Democrats have tried to pass a new voting rights bill only to be stymied by Republican opposition and the filibuster, but these Democratic efforts have been sprawling and unfocused. They've included proposals on voter ID rules and mail-in ballots, for example, that are almost certainly less important than a federal law to block the overturning of elections, as the Times' Nate Cohn has explained, all of which has created a remarkable possibility. In the 2024 presidential election, Republican officials in at least one state may overturn a legitimate election result, citing fraud that does not exist, and award the state's electoral votes to the Republican nominee. Trump tried to use this tactic in 2020, but local officials rebuffed him. Since then, his supporters have launched a campaign with the Orwellian name Stop the Steal to ensure success next time. Steve Bannon has played a central role, using his podcast to encourage Trump supporters to take over positions in election administration. ProPublica has explained. This is a five-alarm fire. Jocelyn Benson, the Democratic Secretary of State in Michigan, who presided over the 2020 vote count there, told the Times, if people in general, leaders and citizens, aren't taking this as the most important issue of our time and acting accordingly, then we may not be able to ensure democracy prevails again in 24. Barton Gellman, who wrote a recent Atlantic magazine article, my second to last for the month, about the movement, told Terry Gross of NPR last week, this is, I believe, a democratic emergency, and that without very strong and systematic pushback from protectors of democracy, we're going to lose something that we can't afford to lose about the way we run elections. Theda Skopel, whose name comes up from time to time, and we never know if we're pronouncing it right, even though she's on TV quite a lot. A Harvard political scientist notes that the movement is bigger than Trump. I think things have now moved to the point that many Republican Party officials and elected office holders are self-starters, she told Tom Edsall of the Times-Opinion. The main battlegrounds are in swing states where Republicans control the state legislature, like Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. Republicans control these legislatures because of both gerrymandered districts and Democratic weakness outside of major metro areas. One way Democrats can push back against the anti-democratic movement: make a bigger effort to win working class votes. Gee whiz, thanks a lot. That's helpful. The Constitution lets state legislatures set the rules for choosing presidential electors. None of this is happening behind closed doors. Jamel Bouie, a Times columnist, recently wrote. That article, I think, is probably sitting in pocket still, waiting to be read. We are headed for a crisis of some sort. When it comes, we can be shocked that it is actually happening, but we shouldn't be surprised. Here is an overview of recent developments. And let's see if we learn anything new here. In Arizona, Republican legislators have passed a law taking away authority over elections lawsuits from the Secretary of State, who's now a Democrat, and giving it to the Attorney General, a Republican. Legislators are debating another bill that would allow them to revoke election certification, quote, by majority vote at any time before the presidential inauguration. So, if the Republican candidate loses Arizona, the Arizona state legislature says, we can undo that. In Georgia, last year, Brad Raffensperger, Georgia's Republican Secretary of State, helped stop Trump's attempt to reverse the result, and that's plural, attempts. State legislators in Georgia have since weakened his powers, and a Trump-backed candidate is running to replace Raffensperger next year. Republicans have also passed a law that gives the commission they control the power to remove local election officials. And I read you the story the other day that they have already begun doing that in, I think, up to 6 counties now where they are actually making that move. In Michigan, Christina Karamo, K-A-R-A-M-O, a Trump-endorsed candidate who has repeated the lie that the 2020 elections were fraudulent, is running for Secretary of State, the office that oversees elections. Republican candidates are running on similar messages in Colorado, Florida, Nevada, New Hampshire, North Carolina, Ohio, Texas, and elsewhere, according to ABC News. Pennsylvania. In Pennsylvania, Republicans are trying to amend the state's constitution to make the Secretary of State an elected position rather than one that the governor appoints. Pennsylvania has a Democratic governor at the moment, of course. Pennsylvania is also one of the states where Trump allies like Stephen Lindemuth, who attended the January 6th rally that turned into an attack on Congress, have won local races to oversee elections. And in Wisconsin, Senator Ron Johnson is urging the Republican-controlled legislature to take full control of federal elections. Doing so could remove the governor, currently a Democrat, from the process and weaken the bipartisan State Elections Commission. What's next? The new anti-democratic movement may still fail. This year, for example, Republican legislators in 7 states proposed bills that would have given partisan officials a direct ability to change election results. None of the bills passed. Arguably, the most important figures on this issue are Republican officials and voters who believe in democracy and are uncomfortable with using raw political power to overturn an election result. Miles Taylor, a former Trump administration official, has helped to start the Renew America movement. Everybody's getting a salary for saving America. It's amazing. Which supports candidates of either party running against Trump-backed Republicans. It is active in congressional races, but does not have enough resources to compete in the state contests that often determine election procedures, Taylor told the Times. Gelman, the Atlantic writer, argues that Democrats and independents, as well as journalists, can make a difference by paying more attention. Grassroots organizers who are in support of democratic institutions, he said on NPR, could be doing what the Republicans are doing at the precinct and the county and the state level in terms of organizing to control election authorities to ensure that they remain nonpartisan or neutral. Well, okay. For more, Let's see. Mark Meadows, Trump's former chief of staff, was involved in fighting the election outcome, according to the House committee that investigated the Capitol attack. I guess that's just a teaser for that big story. It really has nothing to do with this story, except for the fact that that, too, was anti-democratic in nature. Okay, just a few minutes here before we take off for our top of the hour break. Let's see. There are definitely a couple other things we want to get to. Oh, yes, right. There was a comment yesterday I meant to add right after reading you or beginning to read you the story of what Gavin Newsom was doing in attempting to use the weird shield devised by the Texas abortion laws authors that has somehow succeeded in convincing the Supreme Court that that law is beyond their reach, and has said, all right, well, we can construct the same mechanism and use it to attack other things that people think of as constitutional rights, but get away with it because the state isn't actually the one doing it. Why not? Right, like vigilante awards for turning in people who have ghost guns or other unregistered weapons, etc. And it sounds like he intends to try, although I don't know how far away they are from drafting such legislation or whether it's really going to be technically possible. And then I saw Dan Friedman of Mother Jones had written about it too and added the comment, well, it's probably good politics for Newsom. Legally, who knows? And that's exactly right. Who knows? And it's because no one actually does know at this point. That's the whole thing, you know. There's no telling where we stand with this Supreme Court. Legally, nobody knows anything anymore, right? And nobody even knew to start our music on time, so we got to take an early exit in the music. But legally, nobody knows anything anymore. So I was noting, you know, Newsom, his gambit here is certainly on no worse footing than the gambits that have succeeded for others. I mean, the Texas law shield was very shaky to begin with, but they won. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. And a little bit late even in coming back. I was rereading the Jake Sherman tweets here and wondering, I might just have to tweet it out now. He's, he's being very reflective about all of this, but it occurs to me, Sherman, I guess, thinks that, and he's right, normal people will see this and say, gosh, how could you not respond to texts like this and not do anything? Although there's also the very interesting response here from Eric Boehlert, who latches on to this thing where what's his name? Where Sherman says, "Oh, out of transparency, here it is. Here are all my, here's my disclosure that these were my texts." And Boehlert, I think, understandably annoyed at saying, well, geez, out of a sense of transparency, you're disclosing that you sat on these texts for 11 months? Boy, I don't know. Anyone else in the press want to come forward today? It's a good question. Although I do question, even Eric, what do you think America at large or the rest of the press would have made of it to find out that Jake Sherman felt trapped in the Capitol and was under siege? I mean, I think we actually do have a pretty clear picture of the fact that journalists took the assault very personally, and it was why they wouldn't let go of it anytime soon. Although they haven't done a great job in making it stick to Republicans, but right initially, we had that wave just as we had among the Republican electeds and commentariat as well. Initially, oh yeah, this is horrible, and I'm going to distance myself from Trump. And then 5 days pass, and we're all friends here. But I don't know if anything would have come of his saying, "I told you I was frightened and concerned that my life was in danger. Here are some texts that convey that." I don't know, like outside of the context of their being discovered on Meadows' phone through a subpoena process, I don't know how much attention they get. So I don't know. That might be a little bit unfair, but it's a good point too. You might wonder about that, like, during the interim 11 months in which time everything became pretty normalized, you could have maybe brought up, I don't know why you guys are normalizing this stuff. I was there, and I even texted to Mark Meadows saying, you got to stop this, and he wouldn't do anything. But anyway, I found that kind of interesting all by itself and worth taking a look at. But I also wonder, and then I had to just tweet it out, like, what if Mark Meadows did tell Trump what he was seeing? What if Mark Meadows goes to Trump and says, I got to tell you, Mr. President, I'm getting these wild texts from all sorts of people, including, here's one from Jake Sherman, who's been, a reasonably friendly journalist, not like he's Fox News or anything, but I mean, he gets word out when we want something leaked or whatever. And he's tweeting, do something for us. We're under siege in the Capitol. There's an armed standoff at the House chamber door. We're all helpless. And what if, chances are that he ignored all these things, but there's some chance that he read those things to the president, and the president, such as he is, Trump, says, good, I can't wait. Maybe they'll kill some of these people. Fantastic. What if it just encouraged him to keep the attack up, to find out that, Jake Sherman was stuck in the Capitol? That's an entirely possible scenario. And I don't know, that seems like it kind of maybe should be discussed at some point. But whatever. Yeah, oh, look at this. Sarah Posner thinks it's worth a moment here, who says, hey, yeah, this sadly and chillingly is an entirely plausible theory. What if this just encouraged Trump to keep the attack up? Yeah, what about it? That's, yikes, frightening. Is it cool? Do I retweet somebody retweeting me? I don't know. Maybe that's not such a cool thing to do. But I hope everybody sees that thing and begins to wonder about it. All right. Well, gosh, what other things have we put aside in pocket? And I did remember now, I wanted to go back to my Twitter feed and find some of these other things that might not have made it to pocket to share with you. Just, there were so many things, random stuff that happened that I wanted to share with you. Oh, let's see. Right back to our COVID stats from last night. I don't think there's anything, any new developments that warrant additional attention to that at the moment. Yeah, and then all the very interesting reactions to what was going on in the hearings. Oh, yes, Ron Filipkowski came up with this gem, unearthed this gem of Mark Meadows when he was still in Congress. Should I play it for you? I might want to do that. It's about 50 seconds. Maybe I'll open that up, put it, I'll have to do it this way, the procedure of putting it in Pocket so that I can then open Pocket on the big broadcast computer. And maybe it's best that you hear Meadows speak for himself in this. The context, of course, he's still in Congress, and so he's talking about, I don't know which investigation, but, here it is in the Chiron. It's on Fox News. Former IRS official Lois Lerner being questioned and refusing for a second time to answer questions from a Republican-led investigation into the IRS. But, let's listen to what he has to say, because of all the things that he's doing and others linked to the Trump administration, both inside and outside the actual administration, are doing when they're being subpoenaed and called to testify in front of the January 6th committee.
Well, it's good to be with you, Allison. As we see this, really the bottom line message is is that there were emails that could have been responded to, a message and the truth that could have been told to the American people, and yet we continue to see stonewalling and the Fifth Amendment exercise. And really all the American people want is the truth so they can once again trust their government.
And were you expecting Lois Lerner to testify, and did this come as a surprise that she pleaded the Fifth?
Well, we were led to believe that they were willing to cooperate up until just really the last 24 hours. And so
how strange.
Does
that
it come
seems
as
familiar.
a surprise? Perhaps not, but it's obvious that she knows something that the president doesn't know, and that there may be a smidgen of corruption.
Yeah, or there may not be, but that is very interesting. It turns out that there wasn't, and but he's got interesting views on what it means to plead the Fifth before a congressional committee, which of course he's about to do, and so are others. And yeah, how interesting. There were emails that could have been responded to, and truth that could have been told to the American people, and yet we continue to see stonewalling and the Fifth Amendment, and refusing to comply with subpoenas and having to be charged with contempt of Congress. And gosh, it's different when it's you on the line, isn't it? It's interesting that you would come to think so. But, you can't sell anybody on a story of Republican hypocrisy anymore. It's too common and no one's interested. So anyway, I just thought I would share that with you. And now it's marked for inclusion. We'll see that in the roundup. Let's see, other fun stories. Here's Liz Cheney reading the things. I guess you've probably heard the readings of the various texts by now. There's no point in my reading them to you at this point. Let's see, anything else? I want to get past that. I have to scroll to earlier in the day in order to get past the Cheney stuff. All right. Here's no, that's, we've actually been over that territory. All right. Let me jump back then over to Pocket and see what else there might be in a longer format, let's say, now that we have some time. But I have to pop in on some of these things and see what they are about. This was an interesting tweet from NYC Southpaw, commenting on the story, I guess more reporting being done on the Trump, what's now described here as the Trump-Nunes Media Ventures scam. We never did decide whether they say SPAC or SPAC, but you remember the weird financial vehicle behind what he claims is going to be his social media network. In his newsletter today, Matt Levine, says Southpaw, describes several absolutely insane features of the Trump-Nunes Media Ventures scam SPAC, but this built-in risk-free trade for the institutional sponsors might be the most brazen. And I don't know whether the newsletter is a subscription thing or not, but I have a screen grab here that Southpaw provides for us, and it reads this way: or that is what I said last week. It's where it begins, sort of picks up midstream here. But the trade is actually even better for the trade is actually even better for the PIPE investors? Question. Because here is the trade they can do. All right, here we are. Short DWAC stock now. I wish, this might be too jargony for me to figure out. Dang. Short DWAC, I don't know what that is. Stock now, locking in a sale price of about $56 per share. Buy back the stock at closing from the Trump Media Group there. DWAC is the something world, digital world acquisition company. That's the SPAC. So you short their stock now, locking in a sale price of about $56 per share. Buy back the stock at closing from the media group at a maximum purchase price of $33.60. Make $22.40 per share guaranteed. Ordinarily, if you short stock in Trump's thing at $56, you run the risk that it will go up to $100 and you'll lose a ton of money. But if you have committed to the PIPE, TMTG and DWAC, the merging companies here, have agreed to sell you shares at $33.60, subject to downward adjustment. so that the risk is off the table. If the stock goes up, you buy at 33.60. If the stock stays flat, you buy at 33.60. If the stock goes down, you buy at a 40% discount to the market price. If it goes down $20, you buy at $12. If it goes down to $16.67, your price is floored and you buy at $10. But that's fine if you've already sold at $56. So they've managed to put together some sort of, maybe that makes more sense to the financial people out there. And it does say, how did it all happen? Read it all here. He links to Matt Levine, but it's a clear, it's one of those stock manipulation things that I guess it passes SEC muster somehow in all of this. But I guess it should surprise no one that they are already, before they even have a product, are manipulating the stock and the stock price in order to guarantee certain players who will come up with big money, big payoffs right away. It's not money out of Trump's pocket, so he doesn't care. And it's money out of the pockets of, I guess, it comes out of the pockets of idiots like Marjorie Trader Green, who bought shares in the thing and lost it all, or at least half of its value. And I guess these are the people who are fleecing her. So good for them, I guess. Here's Matt Levine and his thing here. How did this newsletter happen? A lapse of concentration, I guess. I list a lot of items every day and I just wasn't paying attention properly. Okay. With a link to what? Bloomberg.com. The Trump SPAC pipe is free money. That's what it says. Can we read it? The answer is no. I think it's paywalled. But, very interesting. But I guess so, like we said, you're not a subscriber, so we can't get it. But apparently insiders know what this is and understand this to be a scheme for fleecing the Trump-loving public who are, buying these stocks retail, essentially, hoping to get rich off of the Midas touch from Donald Trump, which I guess they still believe in, which, also explains why they believe in things like ivermectin and things like that, and that Ashley Babbitt was a martyr, and they're going to believe this too, and this is what keeps Trump going. These people keep throwing their money at him, and he keeps saying, as long as they keep throwing, I guess I'll just keep collecting it in this basket here, and we'll do it. All right, let's see, other pieces, other items I have put away here. Oh, what does this lead to? I'm not even sure. I guess this is vaccine-related news, not scientific news, but other idiots doing things and filing lawsuits, not for ivermectin, but over the vaccine mandates. And one of the dangers of their doing it is there are Trump-appointed judges on the bench. And as I said, like you don't know with Gavin Newsom's gambit about using the weird shield that has succeeded for Texas's abortion law, can you use it for guns? The answer is no one knows, because this Supreme Court will not be at all embarrassed about saying, well, it works for Texas because the thing they were protecting was anti-abortion activism, but it won't work for California because the thing they're trying to protect is stuff that we don't like, which is gun safety. So, therefore, no. And then say, clerks, dress this up in language that doesn't make it immediately obvious that that's what we're doing. And whether they succeed in doing so or not, that's going to be our ruling. And that's all there is to it. So, anyway, that's the danger of having judges that don't particularly care about anything or how they look. And we have more of them. Tierney Sneed, who, as I recall, used to be at TPM, now at CNN, trading initials, has this piece on Trump-appointed judges who question the role of vaccines in the fight against COVID as they block mandates. What do you know? In his order blocking the Biden administration's healthcare worker vaccine mandate, U.S. District Judge Terry Doughty, D-O-U-G-H-T-Y, Doughty, spent several sentences Wow. Laying out without criticism the claims of a doctor who falsely said that the COVID-19 vaccine was not effective in preventing transmission of the disease. So broccoli mandate plus this. Left unmentioned, and Cornhusker kickback. Left unmentioned in Dowdy's opinion was that the doctor's views on the vaccines are so outside the mainstream. How outside the mainstream are they? So outside the mainstream that the healthcare system that once employed him sought a temporary restraining order because it claimed the doctor was improperly associating himself with it. The invocation of a well-known vaccine skeptic is just one example of how federal judges have played down the seriousness of the pandemic while playing up supposed uncertainties about the effectiveness of vaccines. They've done so in an onslaught of court orders across the country, all issued by Republican-appointed judges, and several by former President Donald Trump, that have frozen nationwide all three major vaccine mandates that the Biden administration sought to implement as fears about the Delta variant collided with the winter flu season. The cases themselves generally raise legal issues distinct from the federal government's scientific conclusions, but in many of the cases, doubts about the seriousness of the coronavirus and whether the vaccines are effective in limiting its spread have seeped into the opinions as the judges have taken it upon themselves to explain why their scientific assessments should trump, no pun intended, those of government scientists, which they are not. The trend cuts against centuries of American law that instruct judges to be deferential to elected officials and the scientific experts who advise them on matters of public health emergency response, said Lindsay Wiley, a public health law professor at the American University Washington College of Law. As the state of emergency has dragged on and the response has become extremely politicized, some judges have become more confident in their own ability to weigh the scientific evidence. They do their own research, you see. Wiley told CNN in an email, even to the point of rejecting widespread scientific consensus and cherry-picking testimony from doctors whose expertise is of questionable relevance and whose views are clearly on the fringe. The administration's requirement, via the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, that large companies subject their employees to vaccine requirements or regular testing, was the first to be blocked by a court with a scathing opinion from the extremely conservative Fifth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals. The opinion, written by Judge Kurt Engelhardt, a Trump appointee, took a dismissive tone toward the government's reasoning for imposing the policy. It said the mandate's stated impetus was a purported, quote, emergency that the entire globe has now endured for nearly 2 years, a reference to a dissent by Justice Neil Gorsuch that warned of the risks to civil liberties, quote, when governments proclaim indefinite states of emergency. Oh, now they're worried about that one. We were indefinitely detaining people in Guantanamo, not a problem. Indefinitely taking action on a still existing global pandemic. Come on, guys, it's been too long now. In the OSHA case before the Fifth Circuit, the administration had argued that coronavirus's risks had changed meaningfully in recent months as COVID-19, with the rise of the Delta variant, had grown more virulent and because voluntary safety measures proved ineffective. Nonetheless, the Fifth Circuit said it, quote, remains unclear that COVID-19, however tragic and devastating the pandemic has been, don't get me wrong, poses the kind of grave danger contemplated by the relevant law. Rhetoric that has since been, since been mimicked by other courts that have blocked various mandates. So basically they just say, well, I don't know if it's really dangerous. Maybe it's just the flu. That's how we're making these legal decisions at this stage. The court didn't need to strike that tone in order to reach the outcome that it did, according to Wendy Parmet, a law professor who's the director of Northeastern University's Center for Health Policy and Law, adding that there were other legal issues in the case on which the circuit could have hung its decision to block the mandate. The language as a whole expresses, I think, a skepticism of the severity of the pandemic and whether this is a problem that's really of urgency, she said, adding that the linguistic approach was that of COVID minimalization. It's approaching a stance that feels like the court is adopting the language and the rhetoric of the culture wars as opposed to the "this is a lawyerly, boring administrative law decision," she said. A federal judge in Missouri, who was the first to rule against the healthcare worker mandate, used the words of the federal government against it to conclude that the Biden administration lacked evidence that vaccination status affected transmission of the virus. There is, in fact, a great deal of evidence showing vaccines reduce transmissions of the virus while reducing deaths and the rates of hospitalization. The Trump-appointed judge, U.S. District Court Judge Matthew Schelp, S-C-H-E-L-P, derived the conclusion from a line in the regulatory filing unveiling the healthcare worker rule, which was to be implemented by the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. The regulatory filing noted uncertainties, quote, uncertainties about the current COVID variants and said, the effectiveness of the vaccine to prevent disease transmission by those vaccinated are not currently known. Oh, yes, well, for other variants, sure. The line about came about is what they mean. The line came about in a section of the regulatory filing where the agency was explaining why it couldn't fully quantify the impact of the rule as it was estimating the policy's costs and benefits. The regulatory filing had spent several paragraphs laying out evidence that the vaccine does decrease transmission risk. The agency stressed that by preventing people from becoming infected with COVID in the first place, the vaccines reduced the amount of transmission. University of California Hastings College of Law professor Dorit Rice said, it's R-E-I-S-S in case you're looking it up, said it was highly disingenuous and misleading for Schelp to use the regulatory language the way he did. The CMS said clearly the vaccines decrease transmission and harm, then added, we don't know exactly how much. That's basically what the language is saying, Rice told CNN. Not that they don't know anything, right? But that's what the judge did. An appellate judge, considering a separate Florida challenge to the healthcare worker mandate, borrowed much of Schelp's reasoning in a dissent from an 11th Circuit majority opinion declining to block the mandate. The 11th Circuit decision came down after the mandate had been blocked nationwide by Doughty's opinion, and it did not have the effect of reinstating the policy. The dissenter, Trump appointee Judge Barbara Lagoa, included in a footnote a mention of the new Omicron variant, which had not been discussed in the case. Claiming that the new variant was, quote, potentially able to avoid the protection provided by the currently available COVID-19 vaccines, she said that Omicron's emergence showed how the supposed uncertainties about the vaccine's effectiveness cut against the public interests of keeping the mandate in place. The two judges in the appellate panel's majority, both Democratic appointees, called Lagoa out for speculation and for her failure to cite anything in support of the assertion. What else have we got? Problematic use of claims well outside the mainstream apparently occur in all of this. Biden's mandates have been challenged under administrative laws that allow courts to examine an agency's procedure in rolling out the challenged policies. However, according to Georgetown University health law professor Lawrence Gostin, standard administrative law principles call for the courts to, quote, give deference to the agency's facts and interpretations of its powers. The courts in federal mandate cases have merely substituted their opinions for those of career agency scientists, Gostin told CNN in an email. That is not following the rule of law or precedent. Rice said it was especially an issue that the courts weren't giving deference to the agencies at the early stage that these cases are in before they've been fully litigated. Basically, the court is saying the agency is an expert, the agency has experts, but we believe these experts instead, even though they haven't been interrogated in court, Rice said. The Justice Department, for instance, did not have a chance to interrogate the doctor whose assertions about vaccines were cited by Doughty, as he blocked the healthcare worker mandate nationwide. Doughty summed up that in the viewpoint of the doctor, Peter McCullough, I have to set up, I'm late again with the music as a result of not having the soundboard up. Boy, very late now. So, okay, early exit for us. We're about 10 seconds behind on this. I was too involved in reading about this. Dowdy summed up that in the viewpoint of the doctor, Peter McCullough, COVID-19 vaccines do not prevent transmission of the disease among the vaccinated or mixed vaccinated and unvaccinated populations, and that mandatory COVID vaccines for hospitals do not increase safety for employees or patients. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, the same guy who was just talking to you a second ago. Our Patreon subscription drive is still going strong, with over 175 monthly donors who help keep us on the air. If we've helped keep you going during the pandemic, why not return the favor and help us keep going so we can all be together for the next disaster? Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it easy to make secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for keeping you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We literally could not do this without you. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. In case that last sentence didn't quite make it onto the air before we cut away for the break. Again, Judge Dowdy here was citing the views of one maybe sort of kind of doctor, Peter McCullough, who says that, COVID-19 vaccines, he says, YouTube, not me, I don't say this, but there is a doctor who says that the vaccines don't prevent transmission of the disease, which is wrong, and that they don't increase safety for employees or hospital patients, which is also wrong. But a crazy judge said it's right. And YouTube should, maybe we should be removed from YouTube because there's a judge and who believes this, and we shouldn't mention that judge. How about that? Maybe that's the rule. Doughty, though, is a federal judge in Louisiana. They won't do anything about him, but they'll do something about me for telling you what he's up to. A federal judge in Louisiana who was appointed by Trump cited those false assertions as a reason that it made no sense for the agency's policy to mandate vaccines without other alternatives. In its filings, the Justice Department had said the evidence overwhelmingly pointed to the conclusion that the healthcare staff vaccination is highly effective in preventing transmission among healthcare workers and from the workers to patients. That's the truth of it, right, YouTube? Studies have also shown that vaccinated people with breakthrough infections may be less infectious than unvaccinated individuals with primary infections, resulting in fewer opportunities for transmission, the administration had told the court. McAuliffe is a go-to doctor for critics of vaccine mandates and has testified before legislatures while also making frequent media appearances. But his fringe opinions about COVID-19 vaccines have prompted his former employer, a Texas healthcare system, to take aggressive steps to distance itself from the doctor. Earlier this year, the provider, Baylor, Scott, and White Health, filed a lawsuit claiming that McAuliffe had violated a separation agreement from the hospital by allegedly continuing to associate himself with the network. McAuliffe has denied in the case that he violated the agreement. Dr. McAuliffe has promoted things that can be fairly described as anti-vaccine misinformation, and he does so in the quoted passages in this case as well. Race, the UC Hastings law professor, told CNN. She said it was highly problematic that the judge was drawing from his declaration in the case. CNN reached out to McAuliffe and his lawyers in the Baylor case for comment for this story. His lawyers told CNN that they vehemently objected to the characterization of McAuliffe as anti-vaccine. In the declaration McAuliffe filed in the Louisiana case, he said falsely that the COVID-19 vaccines are not safe generally, and that their risks outweigh the benefits of the majority of the population, and that they do not prevent transmission of the disease among unvaccinated people. This is just one clear example of deeply flawed legal reasoning, not just scientific reasoning, but legal reasoning. Gostin told CNN, "It's absurd to give weight to a given doctor's opinion." This is the key point here, re-emphasizing this. It's absurd to give weight to a given doctor's opinion, especially when that opinion is so at odds with both agency scientists as well as the clear consensus of scientific opinion, including CDC recommendations. You know what? And he didn't even get to what I thought was the more important point, legally speaking. So the common sense answer, he reiterates there, it's ridiculous to give additional weight to, well, it's really ridiculous to give additional weight to any doctor in court. I mean, a doctor is a doctor, and you weigh it, and you can decide for yourself whether you think this is a doctor who's outside of mainstream opinion. But it would be ridiculous to give particular weight to one doctor, especially when that doctor is, is at the fringes. The vast majority of scientific opinion is in opposition to this doctor, but you give this doctor extra weight. What's worse, from a legal perspective, I think it was Gostin who said this earlier, who pointed out from a legal perspective, the idea that you would give additional weight to this doctor who did not appear as an expert in the case and did not appear in the courtroom and therefore was not subject to having his ideas tested in cross-examination. You can't legally, ordinarily. Again, you can't, meaning it's not done. You're supposed to be stopped from doing this, right? But the system that's supposed to stop you is that there are sober justices sitting above you at the Supreme Court who would say, no, hold on a second. Everybody knows, involved in the legal system, that you can't give additional weight to testimony that was never given in the courtroom. Everyone remembers the word for testimony that's given or declarations made outside of the courtroom where they can't be examined. Hearsay, right? Why is hearsay a problem? It was said, I heard him say it. I hear him say that, and I'm reporting it to you faithfully. I've just sworn on a Bible to tell you the truth, so you know something. Well, that's the idea, right? Even if you're right and you are faithfully reproducing that statement, the problem is that the person who said it and understood it and said it for a reason isn't here to be asked about it by lawyers from either side, and not here to be heard in those answers to the questions by the jury. So they just state this conclusion and it's out there, and that's fine for some things. But when it's pivotal to a case, or even when it's, ancillary to a case, if it can't come in under one of the various exceptions, that is when the benefits of hearing something like this from outside the court outweigh the likelihood that it will unfairly prejudice things by bringing them in and not being able to ask questions about it, sometimes they let it in. But here, what's the point of emphasizing this one doctor's opinion? Nothing. What's the point of emphasizing one doctor's opinion when he's opposed by the entire medical establishment? Less than nothing. What's the point of emphasizing one doctor's opinion who's also opposed to the mainstream of medical opinion and who never testified in court and never had his views challenged by lawyers from either side? Less than nothing. So much less than nothing that ordinarily this would not be allowed. And ordinarily, on appeal, judges who sit higher than this district court trial judge would say, this is an error of law. The decision, insofar as it depends on the admission of this evidence and the consideration of this evidence, is overturned. You can't do this. You can't have the two sides bring their experts, testify, blah, 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 and then have a judge say, I didn't hear from the guy, but I read on the internet that he said something, something, something. So put that in there and we'll listen to him, and that's the decision. You can't do it. But again, the definition of can't do it is, are there appeals court judges and Supreme Court justices who can be depended on to say, yeah, when we say you can't, we mean we won't let you. Now that we'll let you, I guess you can. So once again, everything that you learned when you went to law school about the rules of evidence is out the window. So sorry about that for those of you who went to law school and spent a long time trying to figure out how this country works. It doesn't work like that anymore, and everything you knew was pretty wrong when they taught it to you. You just didn't know it yet. Okay, so what else have we got here? We know about, this is more Meadows stuff here. I thought Greg Sargent had a nice thing about what was on yesterday. Maybe he can sum things up for us. We'll see if I still feel like this is a necessary piece now that I'm reading them in reverse chronological order. His piece in the plumb line, opinion, of course. Mark Meadows' cover-up of Trump's coup attempt is falling apart. Was there anything in here that I felt would add to things? I feel like it was unfair. He wrote this at yesterday at 10 in the morning, and then we had all of these texts. So I don't know, maybe this examines some stuff prior to the revelation of these texts that is important and we ought not to overlook. In his new book, believe it or not, remember he wrote this book, former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows offers up a version of Donald Trump's conduct on January 6th that is almost comically sanitized. In his telling, the rioters attacked the Capitol with, quote, absolutely no urging, unquote, from Trump, and the notion that Trump sought to incite them to disrupt his loss is purely an invention of the, quote, fake news. Yeah, so those texts aren't going to be good for you. In a passage that would embarrass a North Korea disinformation specialist, Meadows wrote that the mob assault left Trump, quote, mortified, which is why he didn't answer any of the texts, you see. But Meadows piously insists that this didn't distract Trump from focusing only on the welfare of the country in his final days as president, a noble and selfless impulse that never wavered. The House Select Committee examining January 6th has just released its report recommending contempt charges against Meadows for defying its subpoena. It blows a big hole in Meadows' pleasing little propaganda piece. More broadly, the report will render the various GOP whitewashing devices we've heard. Trump didn't really want to overturn the election. Trump never countenanced the violence. The violence was no biggie anyway, and so on. All much harder to sustain. The report reads like a blueprint for a coup, not just for the attempt that just happened, but also for a future one. It provides a glimpse into the story the committee is piecing together about this effort to thwart a legitimately elected government from taking power, first through almost unimaginably corrupt pressure on many government actors, and then through mob violence. So what is Meadows covering up? First, the report demonstrates how frantically Meadows and Trump's other co-conspirators are covering up Trump's own reaction to the violence as it unfolded. It shows this by describing documents the committee obtained from Meadows before he decided to refuse cooperation. For instance, the report notes that Meadows received many messages urging him, this is before we actually heard the messages, urging him to get Trump to issue a statement that might quell the attack. It also says Meadows was with Trump or nearby as Trump learned about it and weighed what to do in response. Indeed, the report discloses that the committee has obtained text messages indicating that Meadows was, quote, pushing hard to, quote, condemn this S, which was the text from the Don Trump Jr. text, right? Meaning Meadows was urging Trump to publicly call off the rioters. Here's what this really means. Meadows almost certainly had direct knowledge of how Trump responded to all these repeated demands that he call off the violent assault. The report says the committee wants to question Meadows about this, but he's refusing to answer any questions. What is it that Meadows does not want to testify to? Well, we know from press accounts such as this Post report, linked herein, that Trump watched the violent assault unfold on TV and ignored many frantic pleas that he step in. One Trump advisor told the Post that Trump was enjoying the spectacle of his followers fighting on his behalf. We also know from CNN that House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy apparently screamed similar pleas at Trump by phone as rioters tried to break into McCarthy's office. McCarthy subsequently recounted that Trump responded, "Well, Kevin, I guess these people are more upset about the election than you are." Oh, it would have been great if they had gotten through that door. What could be better, right? And then have Trump explaining, well, I didn't think they were going to tear him limb from limb and kill him. But, I guess those people were more upset. But they're very wonderful people. They should go home. You're very special. We love you. Could it be that Meadows does not want to confirm these reports that Trump enjoyed the spectacle of the mob threatening extreme violence to lawmakers who were in the process of making his loss official, and that Trump even treated their cause as a just one? Well, maybe. I don't know. Although why he wouldn't just lie, I have no idea. If so, it would, of course, make Meadows' book account appear even more laughably dishonest. This also hints at what Meadows may be concealing from the committee investigating the worst outbreak of U.S. political violence in modern times, thus showing how malicious and depraved the cover-up of on Trump's behalf has become. And then more, of course, on notes that there is, of course, a blueprint for a stolen election in the report. Underscoring this point, the committee report discloses the existence of other documents it obtained from Meadows that deepen our understanding of the stolen election attempt. For instance, of course, I guess you're referring to the PowerPoint presentation. I will skip the description of it and also note, again, for the record, the suggestion that people around Trump talked about sending the National Guard in to, quote, to protect pro-Trump people was mentioned in this as well. You can see how this all fits together. The Justice Department would manufacture the impression that Biden's win was dubious through investigations and public statements, which Trump pushed for, and this would create the pretext for invalidating Biden's electors in Congress. This would be accomplished by getting Republicans in Congress to invalidate them, or by getting Trump's vice president to abuse his power to delay the count, allowing states to send rogue electors per the plot outlined in the now notorious coup memo. The whole coup blueprint is right there in black and white, and so is the scope and reach of what Meadows and others stonewalling the January 6th committee are so eager to cover up. But we've now learned the committee has extensive receipts, and soon enough, we'll see all of them. We'll just see whether anything comes of having seen all of them. That remains undetermined at this point in time. Let's see. We'll jump to a couple of other things that have been sitting in pocket for a little longer. Let's see. What else do we have here that might... Do you want to have anybody jump the line here on these things? Well, one tidbit of information here. Another House Republican who has tested positive for COVID-19, Representative Brett Guthrie of Kentucky. You'll never believe it. It's happening in Kentucky. Announced on Wednesday evening that he tested positive for COVID-19 and has mild symptoms just hours after he spent a considerable amount of time on the House floor managing debate for Republicans on several non-controversial health-related bills. Well, he's kind of got a health-related issue himself here. We'll see whether anybody else ends up testing positive as well. There was some international news, if I recall correctly. Yes, the president of, I guess, current president or prime minister, I'm not sure which. I don't know how they structure their government there in South Africa. No surprise, given their current fight with the Omicron variant, that top officials in South Africa, likewise stricken by the virus. We'll see how that comes out. Let's see. We have, I don't know whether that is relevant anymore. I was going to read you a couple days ago about the appeals court siding with the House on access to White House records. I guess now that we've gotten some of these texts, I don't think that that's a result of this ruling, but that may just add fuel to the fire, perhaps. So maybe I will share it. This is from Roll Call from the other day. Appeals court sides with House on access to White House records. Trump's lawyers expected now to appeal the ruling to the Supreme Court, just dragging things out some more. Todd Ruger reported from last week, December 9th, a federal appeals court on Thursday denied former President Trump's request to stop certain White House records from going to the House committee investigating the January 6th attack. But the court fight will go on. The U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia gave Trump's lawyers 2 weeks, a very short period of time, to appeal the ruling to the Supreme Court before the transmission of documents from the National Archives and Records Administration, or NARA, or NAMBLA, as Jon Stewart used to say, to the January 6th panel. Trump's lawyers have indicated they will do so. The 3-judge panel unanimously found that Trump had, quote, provided no basis for the courts to override President Joe Biden's judgment that the executive privilege should not be asserted on those documents, or to override the agreement the Biden administration worked out with Congress about them. This is a straightforward ruling issued as expected because the judges are interested in precedent and the rule of law, and they just read it to you the way it should be. But here's how it should go. Both branches agree that there is a unique legislative need for these documents and that they are directly relevant to the committee's inquiry into an attack on the legislative branch in its constitutional role in the peaceful transfer of power, the opinion states. And there's an awful lot in there, but the basic legal premise of it being, what do we do? How do we decide whether or not executive privilege ought to be recognized here? Well, one, given that it's being asserted by somebody who's not the executive anymore, there's an argument to be made that the guy was the chief executive and he has some idea, generally speaking, a normal chief executive will have some idea of what might and might not be appropriate or possibly dangerous to release to the public. Trump is using it disingenuously here, but you could imagine a case in which a former president might know about something that might in fact, if not damage national security, then certainly show, even if it shows him in an unfavorable light, that isn't enough to say, well, that's not a reason. You can say, well, it would show him in an unfavorable light, but only because most people would not take this communication in context. That the idea of the executive privilege is that the president will, from time to time, have to be advised from a controversial standpoint on difficult positions, and that he will need, I think everybody would agree in the abstract, if you have any, not everybody. I mean, there are people who eat horse paste who wouldn't understand this, but you want your president to be getting advice from across some portion, at least, of the spectrum, if not the entirety of the spectrum. Some people will say it's a good idea to leave Afghanistan. Some people will say it's a bad idea to leave Afghanistan. Supposing the decision is made all right, so you've made the decision, you leave Afghanistan. What good does it do us to say there's no such thing as executive privilege, and so therefore you should release this document to the press, that a general says, if you leave Afghanistan, in my opinion, you'll be giving Iran a nuclear weapon. I don't know why anybody would say that. There's no basis in reality for saying that, but somebody says it because they're crazy. There are crazy generals out there. We know that. So he says that, and the president says, that's a load of crap. I don't want to listen to that. But it was communicated to the president. Do we release it? And, knowing that Fox News will go crazy with it and call for nuking Afghanistan or something like that, and you might say executive privilege. That doesn't, that particular thing would be, well, there are a number of reasons not to necessarily force the release of something like that. Or, in other words, though, that's the most mild idea of it, and it's probably not the greatest illustration of things, but the idea is you're supposed to be able to have confidence that private advice given to the president, even if it's controversial, won't be dragged out and turned into a Fox News chyron. But, of course, if the advice is, well, how do I overthrow the current government? Well, I realize this is controversial advice, but if you wanted to, you could do it this way, right? No, that's outside the role of the presidency. You're not supposed to be contemplating that kind of coup, auto golpe, whatever. So, it's problematic. In addition to which, you're not the president. So who has the best idea of what the executive's prerogative should be? Well, we have our own ideas, but why don't we turn for this to the current executive and ask him? And if you don't like that, or if you want more, you could ask a second branch of government. There are only three. One of them has said, we don't think this should be privileged. How about this one? Well, what do you know? This one has the power to speak on behalf of the legislative branch at this point, thanks to the results of the 2020 election, is in the hands of Democrats. That's unfortunate for Republicans, but officially speaking, with some Republican agreement from the committee, they say they also don't think that the privilege should apply. So that's two out of our three branches. The third branch, of course, is us. What are we going to say? Well, I don't know. We could put ourselves in opposition to the other two branches, but we would still lose. It would still be two branches against one. And also, we're not really in that role. The question is, it's an executive privilege, and one of the ways, well, the way that they're arguing you can override it is that there's a legislative need to override it. The executive says, no, there is no executive privilege here. The legislature says there is a legislative interest. How, on what basis did the courts insert themselves and say, you legislators don't know what you're doing. We'll tell you how to legislate. You executive people don't know how to execute anything. We'll show you how to do that. Separation of powers doctrine in the hands of judges that respect it says, no, you don't tell the executive whether or not he can have executive authority or executive privilege in a situation where the other branch also says, no, there ought not to be any executive privilege. Or, if you do say it, you got to have an extraordinary reason. And there isn't one here, as you'll see in the rest of the article, which we only have a few minutes for, so we might as well finish it up. Both branches agree, right, that there's a unique legislative need for these documents and that they are directly relevant to the committee's inquiry into an attack on a legislative branch and its constitutional role in the peaceful transfer of power. Trump filed the lawsuit after he asserted executive privilege over some of the documents. He argues that the disclosures would hurt the office of the president by compromising the ability of presidents to get full and frank advice from advisors without worrying that it will soon become public and used as a political weapon. Maybe. In the main, that would be, if they eliminated the executive privilege entirely, that would be the case. But what if we only limited executive privileges application in a case when the current president disagrees and so does the current legislature, right? Biden disagreed with that assessment for at least the first three batches of records in the House panel's request, determining that the public interest in the House probe outweighs the confidentiality concerns underlying executive privilege. And that's without even getting to the crime fraud exception. Anyway, the D.C. Circuit judges said they did not come to the decision lightly because the confidentiality of presidential records is critical to the effective functioning of the presidency, but the executive privilege over documents must give way when necessary. When is it necessary? When necessary to protect overriding interests. And the president and committee have shown, the current president that is, a national interest in and pressing need for the prompt disclosure of these documents, the opinion states. Trump, on the other hand, failed that task of meeting the legal standards that apply to everyone else to get an injunction, the court found. That includes Trump failing to demonstrate any harm that would arise from the disclosure of the documents, particularly when Congress has a vital interest in studying the January 6th attack. At this early point in the legal fight, when it comes to getting an injunction to stop the production of records, Trump needed to convince the appeals court that he was likely to win the lawsuit. The National Archives has been set to give the first batch of records to the House on November 12th, absent a court order. Because Trump didn't meet his burden, the D.C. Circuit wrote that it did not even need to decide to what extent a court could second-guess a sitting president's judgment that invoking privilege is not in the best interests of the United States. Do you see how that works? That's an interesting little trick there, too, right? Everybody thought that might be the central question. How do you weigh the current president's opinion versus a former president's opinion? And this neat trick allows them to avoid it. Trump was looking for an injunction to prevent the archivist from giving away the documents. And the court says, well, in order to win an injunction, you have to prove, one, that there would be irreparable harm to somebody if we turn those documents over or allow them to be turned over, and two, that you would likely win the case if a judge finally gets to sit down and take all the evidence into consideration instead of rushing it like this. If they weighed it out and they decided, yeah, you're likely to win, then they say, all right, restraining order. You could probably win, and there's irreparable harm if we don't give the order. Neither of those two things are here, so we don't even have to consider how to weigh current president versus former president. Very nice. But they did recognize a difficult position that the courts would have in ruling for Trump. A court would be hard-pressed under these circumstances to tell the president that he has miscalculated, the current president. You, sir, have miscalculated the interests of the United States, and to start an interbranch conflict that the president and Congress have averted, right? In other words, there's no disagreement between Article 1 and Article 2 here about what should happen to the documents. For Article 3 to create that problem, bad precedent.
Radio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
All right, well, we'll be back tomorrow, and we'll talk to Greg about all this criming and treason that's been going on and what people think about it. Of course, Justice Putnam will offer you his take on it next on the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Plus, more news from around the country and around the world, as usual. His unique take on all these things. Stay tuned for more next.